Is your guild not 54 out of 54? Still have a few hard modes to get down? There is no shame in that. Ulduar has been a struggle for lots of guilds as shown in these charts. With TOC rapidly approaching, the time to get all the current content done is waning. So starting today, we will cover tips and tricks that will help you get your guild over the hump and get those last few hard modes down. This video will cover XT, Iron Council, and Memron. A future video will cover others like Yogg, Algalon, and others, so make sure you subscribe to see those. This video is timestamped to show each of the bosses in the description and pinned comment below, so if you're looking for a specific fight, check those out. The first boss we'll be talking about today is XT. This junk bot is still giving plenty of groups trouble despite already receiving a nerf. We're going to cover 3 major topics here: Death Stirring Tantrum, Life Sparks, and Gravity Bombs. Death Stirring Tantrum are likely due to 2 things. The first is a lack of cooldown usage and healing organization, and the second is due to healers getting bombed with life or gravity and having to move out during this critical time. First, every paladin in your raid can run Divine Sacrifice if spec for correctly. Yes, even your ret paladin. They will lose out on some damage, but I mean, come on, it's your ret paladin. They should be used to it. If you have 4 total paladins, 1 prot, 2 HPal, and 1 ret, that is 4 divine sacks you can run. Because Tantrum is on a 1-minute cooldown, you will have 2 D-Sacks available for each Tantrum, providing huge damage reduction capabilities. Your Disc and or Holy Priest will obviously want to use Divine Hymn at some point, ideally not during the Tantrum that takes place during Hero, and your S-Priest can too. Assuming you get 3 Tantrums post-Heart Death, you can double sack each one, then also have a Hymn for at least 2 of them. The first or last, which will occur during your Hero, should be doable without a Hymn. If your healers are getting gravity bombed at critical junctions like during Tantrum, giving them a bop or freedom from your pally to get rid of the movement decrease from Tantrum so they can quickly get out is critical. You can also save an area where healers can quickly run away to drag bombs instead of making them run far away. One last thing on Tantrum: if you're really having issues, bait out a pre-heart Tantrum, as it will not be off cooldown once the heart dies. This extra time might allow you to go from 4 post-heart Tantrums down to 3, which can make a huge difference. Just be ready to heal it as it still hits decently hard. Up next, we'll be talking about Life Sparks. These can quickly overwhelm your group if left unchecked, so you will need some DPS to swap to them. We have our Life Spark recipients go near the tank so they can quickly be taunted and then cleaved down by melee plus hunters and mages. Your slow ramping DPS classes like Affliction Lock probably don't need to do this, as they should die before the dots rack up. Make sure you have these dead as Tantrum goes off, or the combined damage will quickly wreck people. And last, we'll be talking about Gravity Bombs. While in theory these should be handled easily, one mess up can quickly cause your raid to wipe an otherwise flawless run. While groups usually have people only put bombs on one side, the range can take them directly behind your sack to save melee spots later in the fight. Healers can also take them to the opposite side, as long as they are far enough away from where your life sparks go. Up next, we have Iron Council, or Assembly of Iron. This fight is strangely one of the easier hard modes in theory and when looking at the ability list, but even top-end groups have issues at times when the runes don't line up properly going into late Phase 2. The tank damage in Phase 3 can be pretty bad as well, especially if the DPS can't get the boss down before the second tank death. So the 3 areas we'll be looking at for this boss are Phase 1 and 2 safety, optimizing DPS and runes, and keeping tanks alive in Phase 3. In Phase 1 and 2, you can't really afford to lose anyone. While you won't get stacks on the big guy yet, you need all the DPS and heals available for Phase 3. And besides, there isn't really anything in this phase that should kill you. I'm going to assume that you are at least killing the medium guy second. If you aren't, you need to start doing that. Phase 1 should be really easy, as people can all target the small guy and interrupt him. Just move out for overload and he should go down pretty easily. Now in Phase 2, stack in the room and pump the guy down. When the Death Rune ability has about 7 seconds left on cooldown, have everyone spread out. You can pre-assign positions for raiders, primarily healers, to make sure people aren't without heals. Once the Death Rune goes out, move back to the good rune and continue to pump. For the optimizing runes, depending on your group's damage output, you will need to do this process about 1 to 3 times. Once the boss is at 10%, slow damage down and get him to 3% left. Now you need to get a fresh rune out, and as soon as it does, kill him. The problem is obviously that sometimes he waits to cast that rune, and the Death Rune comes out right after, and it's a ruin pool. Don't lose hope, keep attempting it till it works out. Ideally, you will have that empowered rune out for the full duration going into Phase 3. This is critical for hitting that DPS check that is required before you start running out of tanks. In Phase 3, don't waste your tank cooldowns right away. Maybe a trinket or something small, but with Hero, your healers should definitely be able to keep you alive, especially on the first tank. Depending on your group's speed, you will need to go through 2 or 3 tanks before the boss dies. If the boss isn't sub 10% before the second tank dies, you likely won't be getting the boss down by the time the third overload ends. If you can get a kill by the end of the second tank, your first tank can use their cooldowns. The second tank will then use theirs, and the healers can use theirs as well, like Pain Suppression, Guardian Spirit, and Pally Sacrifices during that second tank. If you need a third tank, however, the first tank needs to live just with the healers benefiting from Hero. The second tank will use their personal cooldowns, and a third tank, who will need buffs after a Soulstone or Brez, will then use their cooldowns in addition to any healer cooldowns that they have. Again, Pain Suppression, Guardian Spirit, Paladin, Sax. Anything past 3 stacks will likely cause a wipe, and try to only use 2 tanks for this fight. Any more is overkill and will cause increasingly bad issues with your DPS checks. Mimron is one of the longest and hardest fights in Ulduar, especially if you have raiders that can't handle multiple mechanics at once. Here's what we'll be covering for this fight: strategy for fire management, phase 2 cooldown usage, handling phase 3, and phase 4 execution. Fire management can be handled in numerous ways, so there are strats unlike what I'll be covering here. Have your raid start in the alcove by the button when the fight starts. Have your disc priest control the fire. They can hopefully still spam raid frames with powered shield while sneaking around the edge of the room. Once flame suppression goes out, have people move in just to the quadrant by the button and away from the middle. Obviously you still have to watch out for napalm strikes, so try to stack in groups of 1 or 2, so you don't get groups of 4 or 5 people getting it. This will make sure that a frost bomb doesn't get launched near melee in phase 2, and will clear a large chunk of the existing controlled fire that arrives late in phase 1 in the transition. I would personally argue against using Hero in phase 2, as you can space out your 2 to 3 Divine Sacs along with 1 to 2 hymns from your priests. Aura Mastery Fire Aura is great for this when the heat waves go out as well. Make sure your raid is utilizing all 3 sections of the room, especially post Frostbomb, as that quadrant will now have plenty of room to maneuver around. For phase 3, have your range swap to help with the assault bots. Make sure they are dragging the head out of the fire before dropping it. This way melee gets uptime on it as well. Killing the fire bots might sound counterintuitive, but their silence can be a real problem. Spreading out slightly for bomb bots is also critical. Healers can take this time to either regen mana or help with DPS, as there shouldn't be too much incoming damage besides on the head tank. In phase 4, the biggest thing is prioritizing positioning based on incoming mechanics. Frostbomb and Spin Up are both one-shots, so always make sure you're in a position where you can quickly change your location. When moving, watch out for bombs and fires, as they will both quickly kill you outright, or leave you low enough for the midsection to finish you off with one tap. While you don't have a ton of extra time if Mimron gets a repair off, there isn't actually a huge rush to get this phase down, especially if you saved Hero for phase 4, so prioritize staying alive and being ahead in position rather than eking out a little bit of damage. I hope you guys liked this guide. If you did, please like the video and hit that subscribe button. I'll have some more videos out on the rest of the Ulduar bosses, and also some content for TOC when that releases, so be ready to soak it all in. Hope to see you guys soon. Take care.